For those of you who have noticed a little bit of a rebrand on this channel, it comes with a big announcement. Mets Weekly now has an official podcast. Starting next Sunday on this YouTube channel, there will be episode 1 of the Mets Weekly podcast. So make sure to go over to our Anchor and follow us on whatever platform you get your podcasts. We're really excited to give you guys brutal honesty for 60 minutes every single week. So make sure to tune in, and we'll see you guys next week for episode 1. After the former White Sox first baseman Jose Abreu signed a multi-year deal with the Astros, the king of media contradiction, Andy Martino, reported that the Mets plan to address the DH position internally this offseason. Now, as a whole, we are not really pumped about this, considering how much this position struggled during the 2022 season, but the options are there, and some are more trustworthy than others. It's time to weigh out those possibilities with the new information. Whether Martino is bullshitting or not, here is how the Mets can address the DH position internally. Even though the big expectation this offseason is to get a big, versatile power bet to protect Pete Alonso, the house is pretty full. There is definitely some options out there. Daniel Vogelbach, who was just brought back on a $1.5 million team option. There's Darren Ruff. Some of the young guys like Mark Vientos, Francisco Alvarez. There are also some other options that are yet to be mentioned. So how do you feel about this from last year, and how do you feel they should address this going forward?
Leave it to Andy Martino to, again, when there's no news besides the Abreu signing, you're thinking, oh, that has nothing to do with the Mets, to make it about the Mets. Want to go back and run back a mediocre thing that didn't work last year. The Mets are like, yep, let's run it back and think about adding Vientos and Alvarez. Oh, we saw them for a cup of coffee. But for me, this is a horrible idea. There are better ways to find the DH externally. Do like that the Mets are semi-believing in their young prospects, but this is not the time to be doing this. The window is not big, and I love Alvarez, but I love Alvarez as the catcher, not as the DH.
I think the fact that some of these guys can provide you flexibility and the fact that some of these guys can't, it definitely puts you in a tough hole. You have guys like Francisco Alvarez, who the only way we know he is going to develop into one of the best players into baseball that he's expected to be is if he actually gets reps at catcher. We also have a prospect in Mark Vientos who can be very one-dimensional, who you also don't want to take that big of a bet on. In my opinion, there is absolutely no reason to ignore a deep hole in free agency for a prospect, no matter how high you are on them. Darren Ruff sucks. The fact that he has a chance to be on this roster next year is sickening. I think a lot of the trust is going to go into Daniel Vogelbach if Mark Vientos does not turn out to what he is expected to be as an elite power protection bat. I think a lot of the trust is being put into Daniel Vogelbach, mainly because they did bring him back on a team option. It may be cheap, but the fact that we're getting rumors about them dealing with this internally, and also the fact that they do not want to trade any of these prospects who also could be a DH, I think that Daniel Vogelbach might be the main guy to get the starting job, and I'm not really happy about that because I don't think that he's an everyday DH, and I think he's extremely limited, but for the role that he does play, he does it very well. I just really don't like the overconfidence in a system that failed for a team that was trying to win it all. So let's split all of these internal DH options into two groups. Let's say there's a hell yes and a no. Who goes in those categories?
Obviously, we'll start with Darren Ruff. He can piss off. Francisco Alvarez as a DH can piss off because, again, he needs to be the catcher. The value of Alvarez is bigger and better behind the plate. It takes the weak bat of Tomas Nido out of the lineup. Alvarez is the catcher. Tomas Nido is the backup. As great of a defender that Tomas Nido is, he's not worth it. We said it in past videos. As soon as that man steps on the big league roster, he's the catcher, without a doubt. James McCann being here or not, which who cares? Once he's on the team and is now solidified as the guy, he's the catcher. Nope, playing around, being like, oh, I want to get. He's here, he's behind the plate. So the value of him as a DH is not worth it at all. In that case, then trade him. If you're going to go out and trade and fill other holes, or go out and sign another guy. Daniel Vogelbach, good at what he does, is not an everyday DH. His best value is coming off the bench. Yes, he has some power upside, but he's not the greatest power hitter. No defensive value. And then we'll get to Mark Vientos. Me and you, not the biggest fans of Mark Vientos, even when he's a minor leaguer and he had all the great Twitter highlights. We're like, we're still trading this guy for something, right? We're still getting this guy out of here because, again, we have Brett Beatty and we have the upside of potentially, if we do need a third baseman, to go find one externally or trade for one, meaning Vientos does not have a position on this roster. The platoon is Daniel Vogelbach and Mark Vientos. We've been there, done that to an extent. Didn't look great. Two guys, one of them has to be on the bench every day, who gives you no defensive value. But the fact that you have the external resources, you have the money, and there are guys you can get to fill that and just take one roster spot. Running this platoon, I get it, it's kind of the way of baseball, but when you have the money, go out and just get your guy and use those other guys to solve other questions on your roster.
And we've talked about a lot of these DH options not being flexible options, and how we have this pile of DHs who have not really proven that they are a game changer or can protect Alonso consistently. Now, there is another way that they can do this, and I don't know if this is something that they are considering doing because they're talking about this being internally. We don't know if it's completely true, but it's kind of like a double agent method. We've talked about how these platoons are something that the Mets really cannot do with a position that really struggled as much as it did. With a lot of these young guys being called up, and with the flexibility that you do have with most of your outfielders and guys who are actually starting, it's possible that they could put both of those bats in both of those combinations into the lineup. We've seen Vientos, his best defensive position is first base. I wouldn't recommend him doing it. Sometimes you have Vientos playing first base, Alonso's the DH. You have Alonso at first base, Vientos is the DH. You can even do this combination with Escobar and Beatty. Beatty can be the third baseman. Escobar can be the DH. Beatty can be the DH. Escobar can be the third baseman. You also have Canna and McNeil. Want to put Guillorme in the lineup because we all know that Buck has a man crush on him. McNeil at the DH, or you put Canna at the DH, and one of them goes to left field. I think this personally works a lot better with external options, like maybe Alvarez and Contreras flip-flopping between catcher and DH every 3 compared to every 2 days. You bring in Trey Mancini, and he flip-flops with Alonso between first base and DH, and you also can keep these guys healthy. We know that these young guys need their reps at their perfect position, especially Beatty and Alvarez. If they have their occasional day at DH, that's fine. Yes, you do have the flexibility, but you're also risking the development of these young players getting playing time in the major leagues. Now, out of all of those double agents, which one would you say is the best combination and works the best for everyone and evens it out, provides a lot of balance?
Eduardo Escobar and Beatty would probably be the most flexible way to do this, because if you could flip Dan Vogelbach for a controllable asset to maybe a reliever, trade him for what you traded him for in the beginning, he's only making $1 million. Teams would want that. And then it also gives you the ability to put Eduardo Escobar at third base and keep Brett Beatty in the lineup. And let's say, even though Brett's defense, I still think it could be above average. I don't think he's going to be this platinum glove, generational defender. That's not what he is. Maybe giving him some days off and letting him be the DH and moving around, maybe potentially going back to the idea of maybe putting him in the corner outfielders to potentially give him a couple days in the outfield, maybe trading Vogelbach, trading Vientos for, again, the Mets need pitching in every certain way. I know me and you have clamored for Vientos not being here anymore, and it never seems like they're going to do it. But if it was up to me, you have the internal with Brett Beatty. I'm not making Alvarez the DH. Alvarez is the catcher. Darren Ruff is sent to Siberia. And then you could potentially take 2 assets in Vientos and Vogelbach, clear up some of these non-versatile people, and you could potentially turn them into arms for the pen. Maybe you find yourself a starting pitcher, that you maybe a Trevor Williams type pitcher. Eduardo potentially against lefties. Maybe Eduardo goes to third. Then you can put Alvarez at DH and put Tomas Nido in if you want to do that to get as many right-handed bats in the lineup. It does give you that flexibility. Vogelbach and Mark Vientos on this roster is not going to go well because you have 2 guys who don't play defense. I know Vientos can play third. He's not great. But turning those 2 assets that don't bring you any defensive value into pitching, or potentially maybe a utility guy. Maybe you find yourself a Josh Rojas. Let's just throw a guy who can literally play everywhere. Maybe you turn him into one of those guys and you have a more versatile bench.
We talk about versatility. Even though Eduardo Escobar can play a position, and we know that Brett Beatty can play a position, there also brings in the clue of possibly giving a lot more playing time to the young guys. And I think that's something that has been established with this rumor of them staying internal with the DH. There's another idea, and it's kind of weird. It's a little bit out of the box of a thought, but we have not really seen it in action yet. Ronnie Mauricio. He's been playing third base in the Dominican League, and from what we have heard, he's been playing it fairly well. And I'm not going to say that he is going to be a future third baseman, but we all know that he's not going to be our shortstop if he stays here. With the thought of them keeping all these prospects because they want to hug on to them and think that they are God's children and made by Jesus, Mauricio and Beatty. If you want extra power in that lineup and want to flip-flop them between third base and DH, do you think that would benefit them at all?
No, Mauricio is not in this timeline now. Like, he's a year plus away. He's going to probably play at Syracuse full-time most of this year, and we'll see how he does. Yes, he's kicking ass in the DR. Again, we do like that he's playing third. Like, we know shortstop's not going anywhere but for the next 10 years. So if he wanted to play, maybe even second base, but moving him to third because he's a bigger guy, a stockier guy at third. But he is not in this conversation for this year's team. I would be genuinely shocked, kind of like how when we saw Beatty and Alvarez, if there's literally no one else and, like, everything has hit the fan, there's no way this season you're going to see Ronnie Mauricio, and it would take so many injuries or so many disappointments. He would have to, like, Juan Soto AAA, and you're like, okay, then maybe this kid's got a chance. And we know his background as a hitter. He's not going to do that. He's going to strike out a ton, not going to walk. He's going to swing the bat. But again, he has the upside. But we've already said he needs to be traded. Like, go get the assets you need, and he's the guy to trade.
I'm starting to think that's just right. Now, during the process of recording this video, Andrew did have a full-on toxic shock seeing the fact that Jose Abreu did get $20 million per year, and it wasn't $20 million over 3 years. So maybe this internal approach is the way to go. Maybe it's an interesting way to do it. There is some options out there that can provide you the value of a DH externally. We all know that it makes sense why they're going in this position, but we want them to think out of the box since it didn't work out at this position. But all I can say is that Jose Abreu, JD Martinez, they were on my avoid list for a reason.
John Heyman, do a better job, my guy. You got me thinking this guy's signing for $6 million AAV. And I'm thinking, oh, that's not bad. $6 million for Jose Abreu over, $6 million a year. That's solid. $20 million a season. Are you f***ing kidding me? Freddie Freeman's making $27. You're telling me that Freddie Freeman is only $7 million worth more than Jose Abreu? Are you? What?
This market is completely busted. Edwin Diaz broke the reliever market. Now the first base / DH market is all fucked up with a 36-year-old getting $20 million per year. This is going to be an interesting free agency.